Scientists found fish surfacing in the Congo River already dying, not from predators, not from poison, but from decompression, the same condition that destroys the lungs of deep-sea divers. In a river that discovery alone should have changed how the world thinks about this place. It didn't even make the list of the strangest things found here. The Congo Basin covers over 3 million square kilometers. Much of its interior has never been entered by an outside researcher. What has been documented at its edges is already difficult to explain. What remains inside in the river systems, beneath the swamps, in the caves carved into the clay banks of channels that no survey team has ever reached, is still, in the most literal sense, unknown. Before we go further, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. What follows are 7 discoveries from the Congo that range from scientifically extraordinary to genuinely unresolved. They are documented, they are real, and not one of them has a complete explanation. The Democratic Republic of Congo sits at the center of Africa, like a locked room that no one has fully opened. It contains the second largest rainforest on Earth, a river so deep it has its own pressure zones, swamplands that hold more stored carbon than 2 decades of global industrial output, and communities living along waterways that no biological survey has ever formally mapped. Researchers have been studying its edges for over a century. The interior keeps producing things the edges did not prepare them for. Number 7. The river with no bottom. Scientists did not go looking for the depth. They went looking for an explanation. Pale, blind fish were appearing at the surface of the lower Congo River, already dying, already past the point of survival. Not injured, not diseased, decompressing. Their tissue was forming the same internal air bubbles that form in the bodies of divers who ascend too fast from extreme depth. Except these were freshwater fish. In a river, to produce that kind of decompression, the fish had to be coming from somewhere very deep, very fast. Researchers followed that logic downward. What they found was a river descending over 220 meters in certain stretches, deeper than any other river on Earth, not by a small margin, by a margin that required a complete revision of what a river system was understood to be capable of. Below the surface, hidden waterfalls and rapids were generating pressure zones that had, over millions of years, done something remarkable. They had turned sections of the same river into isolated environments, as separated from each other as islands. Fish populations on either side of those pressure barriers had been evolving independently, unable to cross, unable to mix. Over 300 distinct species have been identified in the lower Congo. Biologists believe a significant number have never been seen alive by a researcher. That a Congo River has been flowing through the center of one of the most observed continents on Earth for millions of years. Science found out how deep it was because the fish started surfacing wrong. What else is down there has not been answered. And the next discovery suggests the river is not the only thing in the Congo that hid in plain sight for centuries. Number 6. The animal that shouldn't exist for the entirety of recorded natural history. Every explorer who moved through Central Africa, every colonial era naturalist who catalogued the continent's wildlife, every survey team that mapped the river systems and documented the forest, not one of them had any record of it. The okapi, standing over 5 feet tall, weighing up to 700 pounds, striped across its hindquarters in a pattern that makes it look, at first glance, like something assembled from 2 different animals. The only living relative of the giraffe, living in the Ituri rainforest of the Democratic Republic of Congo, terrain that European researchers had been moving through for centuries, unknown to science until 1901, not discovered in some remote, inaccessible wilderness that no outsider had ever entered, undiscovered in a forest that had been documented, traversed, and studied for generations. The animal had simply learned across millions of years of evolution to stay still, to use the striped camouflage on its legs, to dissolve into filtered forest light, to move through terrain that humans passed through regularly, in complete invisibility, for as long as humans had been passing through. It was the local Mbuti communities who knew it existed. They had always known. The outside world had not thought to ask. Since its formal discovery, the okapi population has collapsed by an estimated 50% in 2 decades. Habitat loss and poaching are documented factors, but the full rate of decline still does not have a single confirmed explanation that accounts for all of it. The animal that hid from the entire outside world for all of recorded history is disappearing, and the scientific community is not entirely certain why. What comes next is not a creature. It is something far larger and and far closer to collapse. Number 5. The carbon trap beneath the swamp. In 2017, a research team surveying the cuvette centrale region of the Congo Basin published a finding that received far less attention than it deserved. Beneath the swamps, beneath the waterlogged, largely inaccessible interior that development had never reached, they had mapped peatlands covering an area the size of England. Compressed into that waterlogged ground was approximately 30 billion tons of stored carbon, the equivalent of roughly 20 years of total United States fossil fuel emissions, held in place by water, by vegetation, and by the same political instability that had kept heavy infrastructure out of the interior for decades. The peatlands were intact because no one had built a road through them yet. In 2019, researchers confirmed the presence of oil beneath those same peatlands. International energy firms began feasibility assessments. The question of how to extract it without destabilizing the carbon above it became quietly a subject of serious commercial interest. There is no resolution. The assessments continue. The carbon sits where it has always sat, in swampland that has remained untouched, not by policy or protection, but by the difficulty of getting there. A road changes that. A single access route through the interior, built for any reason, logging, mining, oil extraction, dries the peat. Dry peat releases carbon, 30 billion tons of it, into an atmosphere that is already running out of room. The Congo Basin has been absorbing the consequences of the outside world for over a century. This would be the outside world absorbing the consequences of the Congo. From here, what this place has produced stops being merely extraordinary. It starts being something harder to look at directly. Number 4. The overnight structure. One morning, the people of Kinshasa woke up to find something standing in their city that had not been there the night before. In the Bandel neighborhood, a 12-foot metallic structure had appeared overnight, triangular, tall, planted in the street with no explanation, no permit, no construction crew. No witness to its arrival. The city of over 17 million people had been sleeping, while something was built in its midst, and nobody had seen it happen. For days, crowds gathered. The structure drew the kind of attention that comes not just from strangeness, but from unease. Its triangular form reminded some residents of symbols they associated with secretive organizations. Others connected it to the metallic monoliths that had been appearing in various countries around the same period, structures that had also arrived without explanation and disappeared the same way. The comparisons did not calm anyone. The mood shifted. People arrived with sticks and tools and began taking it apart piece by piece, not out of vandalism, but out of something closer to the need to know what was inside. What was inside was nothing. Sheet metal wrapped around a bare frame. No mechanism, no marking, no component that explained why it had been constructed or what it was meant to do. Before any authority could formally respond, the structure was set on fire and reduced to ash and scrap. No individual or organization has ever claimed responsibility for building it. No camera captured its arrival. No explanation has been offered in the years since. A 12-foot structure appeared overnight in one of Africa's most densely populated cities. Nobody saw it go up. Nobody came forward afterward. What was built in the dark in Kinshasa and why remains an open question with no candidate answer. And what Colonel Van Lierde saw from his helicopter over Katanga 6 decades earlier is a question that has been open even longer. Number 3. The snake of Katanga. Colonel Remy Van Lierde was not a man who startled easily. By 1959, he had completed over 400 military flight missions. He had spent years operating aircraft over some of the most demanding terrain in Central Africa. He knew what the jungle looked like from above, the scale of the trees, the way animals moved through the canopy, how size and distance could deceive an untrained eye. None of that prepared him for what he saw over Katanga. Moving across the ground below the helicopter was a snake of a size that had no category in any field guide, any military briefing, any biological record Van Lierde had ever encountered. He estimated its length at over 50 feet. To place that in context, the largest reticulated pythons ever confirmed by science reach lengths just above 20 feet. The green anaconda, the heaviest snake on Earth, rarely exceeds 17. What Van Lierde was looking at, if his estimation held, was more than double the length of any snake that science has ever measured. As the helicopter descended for a second pass, the animal animal raised the front of its body nearly 10 feet into the air. Van Lierde later said he believed at that moment that the snake was preparing to strike the aircraft. They did not descend further. One photograph was taken. It exists. Researchers who have examined it using the surrounding vegetation as a scale reference have not been able to dismiss it. They have also not been able to explain it. No known species comes within half the size Van Lierde described. No expedition has returned to the Katanga region specifically to investigate the account. The photograph sits in the record, unresolved, alongside the testimony of a man with 400 missions of experience who said he had never seen anything like it and never expected to again. The question has never been formally closed. It has simply been set aside. What the fishermen of the interior river systems have been setting aside for generations is something older than Van Lierde's photograph and considerably harder to dismiss. Number 2. The creature that halts the rivers. The name comes from the Lingala language, spoken across the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mokel, Membem, translated, it means the one who halts the rivers. Communities living along the interior waterways of the Congo Basin have been describing this creature for as long as outside researchers have been present to record the accounts. Not one community, not one river system. Multiple groups separated by hundreds of kilometers of dense jungle and interconnected waterways, with no documented contact between them, describing the same animal in the same terms. Semi-aquatic, massive in size, territorial enough that fishermen will not take canoes into certain stretches of water. Plant-eating, according to the accounts, which is the detail that stops most researchers, because a territorial, aggressive, semi-aquatic herbivore of that scale has no living analog in any known taxonomy. But it is one specific detail that separates these accounts from standard folklore. Thus, independent communities, separated by geography and by generations. The descriptions locate the creature in the same type of place. Caves carved by river water into the clay banks at the sharp bends of interior channels. Not a vague presence in the jungle, a specific habitat, a specific behavior, a specific location type repeated across accounts that had no opportunity to coordinate. Folklore generalizes. These accounts locate. No biological survey has reached the interior channel systems where the sightings originate. The terrain is too dense, the waterways too unpredictable, and the funding for an expedition of that depth has never materialized. The accounts continue to be collected. The interior continues to be unsurveyed. Something is being described consistently by communities who have lived on these rivers for generations. What it is has not been investigated at the depth the consistency of the accounts would seem to warrant. What comes next is not a creature, and it is not a mystery in the conventional sense. It is something documented, verified, and sitting in plain sight. And it is the most unsettling entry on this list. Number 1. The hunger beneath the wealth. The Democratic Republic of Congo holds the largest cobalt reserves on Earth. Its river system generates hydroelectric potential that researchers estimate could power the entire African continent. Its peatlands store 30 billion tons of carbon that the rest of the world is scrambling to manage. Its forests, its minerals, its waterways. By any resource measurement, this is one of the wealthiest pieces of land on the planet. Over 25 million people living on that land are facing severe hunger right now. Nearly 3 million are at famine level, not approaching it at it. Today, among the 255,000 Congolese people involved in cobalt mining, 40,000 are children. Most work without protective equipment, using their hands to extract minerals from the ground. Most earn less than $2 a day. The cobalt they pull from the earth moves through a global supply chain and ends up in the rechargeable batteries powering smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles, the devices that the rest of the world is using to build what it calls a sustainable future. The people who made that future possible are living in conditions that have not meaningfully improved across the decades that supply chain has been running. This is not an oversight. It is not a temporary condition caused by a single conflict or a single administration. It is a pattern that has persisted through multiple governments, multiple international interventions, and multiple decades of global awareness. The resources leave. The conditions remain. The Congo is not a mystery because its jungle hides strange creatures or its river conceals unknown depths. Those things are real, and they are remarkable. But the deepest mystery the Congo holds is this one, documented in annual reports, confirmed in humanitarian assessments, visible in the gap between what this land contains and what the people living on it are allowed to keep. That gap has no resolution in sight. It has no agreed explanation. And It has been there, in the record, for longer than most of the other mysteries on this list. The Congo River is still moving. DEET has been moving for millions of years, through terrain that hid a relative of the giraffe from the entire outside world, through channel systems where communities describe creatures that no survey team has ever gone to verify, past peatlands holding carbon that the rest of the world has quietly begun to assess for extraction, through a city where something was built overnight and burned before anyone could explain it. The fish are still surfacing wrong in the lower river. The interior channels are still unsurveyed. The hunger figures are still climbing. The Congo does not withhold its secrets because it is impenetrable. It withholds them because the attention has always stopped at the edge, at the resources that could be extracted, the data that could be published, the footage that could be filmed, and has rarely gone further. What is further in has not changed. It is still there, it is still waiting, and no one has gone to look.